Hi everybody, I'm Oliver. I'm one of the board members of Freethought Arizona, and we're happy to welcome the Satanic Temple of Arizona to speak to our group. And what they're going to do is tell you a little bit about their organization and go through some of the campaigns that their organization and this chapter specifically are working on currently. The Satanic Temple is a non-theistic religious organization of which TSTAZ is a chapter organization. They fight for religious equality as called for in both the Arizona Constitution and, of course, our U.S. Constitution. They conduct charitable works and social events for Satanic Arizonans to get together, and to help our community. Michelle Shortt is the chapter head of TSTAZ. She and Stu co-founded TSTAZ, and she oversees the several committees that are working toward the goals of TSTAZ, and kind of brings everybody together to work towards these important goals. She has a background in mortuary sciences and in modeling. And moving on to Stu, he is one of the council members for the Satanic Temple, the parent organization of TSTAZ. TST's headquarters are in Salem, Massachusetts. They were founded not too long ago. They will probably get into the details on that and the founding principles of the organization. There are 17 chapters of TST, plus many other unofficial groups that just bring Satanists together to work on the same goals, but they haven't quite grown to be full chapters yet. Stu de Haan is the general counsel for TST, and he's a spokesperson for the organization as well. And of course, he co-founded TSTAZ along with Michelle. He's a criminal defense lawyer, and he plays guitar in the band Scar Eater here in Tucson. So please welcome Stu and Michelle.
All right. Do I need that or just this?
Thank you.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
No.
Is this thing on?
Check, can you hear me? Yeah. Right? Cool.
Hello. Loud. Annoying. All right. Is that? All right. How about now? All right. Well, he did most of the introduction, so I'll just get started. One of the things that we do with these talks is you're probably wondering why we're here if you've never heard of us before. But I think you'll find that our causes align. What we do is pretty much enforce secularism through pluralism. So our tactics are a little different from the Freedom from Religion Foundation and things like that. So as we do these talks, the longer the organization is around, the harder it is to kind of concisely say what we do, because we have a lot of campaigns that are ongoing, that are always evolving, and a lot of new campaigns. The more chapters that start, the more issues arise, because from state to state, there's different theocratic movements that we combat, and it's vastly different. We're going to kind of go and compare some of the different issues that we face going forward here, especially where we have a kind of a theocratic looking government, which is very strange with the way some of these politicians speak and some of the things that they pass. And today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about our tactics versus the tactics of kind of other organizations. And in that, we're going to discuss what's happening here in Arizona. But we broke it up into three parts this time. So Michelle Shortt and I co-founded this in 2016 in Arizona, and we're going to talk about how that actually happened with an invocation campaign in Phoenix. But also we have Shalise Blythe here that we've added to the talk, because she is also part of the National Council, and she's the National Director for our After School Satan Club, as well as the member of one of our organizations called the Gray Faction. So we figured she's the expert in that between the three of us. So we're going to break this into three parts. Michelle first is going to talk about what we are, what we're about, how we're not a political organization, we're a religious organization, talk about what Satanism is to us, and then we're going to go into some of the specifics. So here is Michelle.
Hello, everybody. So the Satanic Temple, as Stu mentioned, we are a religious organization, but we are very politically active. Our members are very passionate. They want to help out their communities. So many members do take political stances, but the Satanic Temple tries to remain as nonpartisan as possible. And we like to live our lives by these guiding principles, our 7 fundamental tenets. These are our deeply held religious beliefs, ones that we model our lives according to, and we apply it to different things according to our own interpretation. So the tenets, they're not dogmatic in any way, and they evolve over time. We do not have a book like the Bible that says this is the truth and this is what you must believe. You know, these are our truths, and according to however lifestyle you decide to live, you can apply them in such a way. You know, some people apply them to their own bodies. So with one of our tenets, our body's inviolable. We believe that government should not impose any arbitrary rules on what we can and cannot do with our bodies, as well as our medical care must conform to the most current scientific understanding. And that's extremely important when it comes up in one of our campaigns, which is the Religious Reproductive Rights Campaign, which we will discuss later. The tenets, you know, can also be guiding principles to, you know, dietary, how you live your life. As you know, if you want to choose to be vegan, you can say that, well, sure, I can be vegan, but do not try to apply your lifestyle simply because, you know, the first tenet says in accordance with reason, and what your opinion is that, you know, we can live without any meat products. So that's according to your own, you know, personal will, and you can apply it however you like. Our tenets, though, do derive from Enlightenment era values, which we like to value reason, nature, happiness, progress, and liberty. And this organically evolved through various schools of thought, artistic works and literature, all the way back into the 1600s. As I said, the Satanic Temple, we don't have a dogmatic book, but if there was one that we do take a lot of reference from is John Milton's Paradise Lost. And that was a great poem, or a great book that was basically humanized Satan. This is where we start to see Lucifer, you know, fighting this noble battle against arbitrary authority. And despite the insurmountable odds that were against him. So, you know, we take reference to that, and, you know, we see Satan as more of a metaphor than you would a literal character. We take Satan literary from, you know, the various works we take inspiration from. So, the mission statement of the Satanic Temple is to encourage benevolence and empathy among all people, reject tyrannical authority, advocate practical common sense and justice, and be directed by the human conscience to undertake noble pursuits guided by the individual will. We are civic-minded, and we have been involved in a number of good works, including taking a stand against the controversial and extremist Westboro Baptist Church. And we work on behalf of children in public schools who have been subject to corporal punishment and much more. So as we said, you know, we do take a stance, you know, against organizations such as the Westboro Baptist Church. We do take a stance for children, where we believe that, you know, they shouldn't be subjected to corporal punishment by the staff members. So as Satanists, we like to be active within our own communities. Satanists do believe that, you know, self-preservation is first and foremost. However, we do not see this as the end-all. And working with our community does not have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be stuck in a vacuum where, you know, it's either work with your community or preserve yourself and be selfish. They're not mutually exclusive. You can have a give and take a little bit of both. Let's see. So do we worship Satan? So there's different types of satanic organizations. Satanic Temple is just one branch. Our religion is Satanism, and there are different flavors of Satanism according to different organizations. The most popular, which you will see, is that we get confused with the Church of Satan, which was started by Anton LaVey back in the 60s. As we have evolved, it's the Church of Satan, it was in the times, there was a hippie counterculture there, and Anton LaVey hated the hippie counterculture, and it was mostly for shock value at the time. Satanists are theatrical. We do love our theatrics. We like to play with the whole psychodrama kind of thing, and take things metaphorically to empower ourselves. So we are not the Church of Satan. We have our own guiding tenets and principles that are different from the LaVeyan school, that we feel represents a natural evolution of satanic thought. The overriding principle calls for utilizing the best scientific evidence available to make the most rational, real-world decisions. And to that end, we reject LaVeyan's social Darwinistic rhetoric that fails to agree with what is currently known regarding social evolution, specifically as it relates to research in evolutionary biology, game theory, reciprocal altruism, cognitive science, etc.
One thing that's interesting about the LaVeyan take from the Satanic Temple is some people completely divorce themselves from it and say, we want nothing to do with LaVey. But depending on which chapters you ask, a lot of people came from LaVeyanism, and that's what they found in high school. That really spoke to them, and this is just kind of the next step to people. So in that, we call it the satanic milieu. It's kind of this evolution. Some people think that was the beginning and the end of Satanism was LaVey. We think that it was a very important part. It founded it as what we call modern Satanism, but it spans hundreds of years before that as far as the concept of using the metaphorical dark angel, so to speak, as a socio-political counter-myth to fight basically tyranny at the time. So there's various ways to look at this. A lot of people will tell you what's right or wrong. We reject that and say there's various versions of it. So I'll add that to that.
Sure. That's a very good point, Stu. Because, he's right. With our chapter, we're very much, we give props to LaVey. That's where I personally came from. But, as a lot of people, since we're making headlines, all they really know is what they've heard about the Satanic Temple. So it's not something that we like to reject, but we certainly don't point that out as go read the Satanic Bible, which was written by Anton LaVey. We have a number of other works that we point people to. So the Satanic Temple also rejects the LaVeyan fetishization of authoritarianism. We believe this is antithetical to satanic notions of individual sovereignty. Further, while LaVeyan Satanism is atheistic, as are we, and in that it rejects the notion that Satan is a conscious entity, it is still supernaturalist. The Satanic Temple does not forward supernatural theories of the universe and finds very little value in LaVeyan ethics, such as those that instruct one to acknowledge the power of magic that you have successfully employed, or otherwise you will lose everything you have obtained. So, and that's from the 11 Satanic Rules of the Earth. So we reject all kinds of supernaturalism, and we would like to stress that we are still a religion despite not having that God complex. You have Buddhism, you have Confucianism, you have Jediism, where you can even take a metaphor of a character or a philosophy, as you would say. Got it. Or a philosophy, as you could say, and model your life according to those guiding principles. So, we really would like to stress that, we are a community despite not having that supernatural aspect. And another thing that makes us different from other satanic organizations is our activism. That's what we're known for. That's what makes the headlines usually. We can do all kinds of charities all day and do things for our community, but, unless it's some catchy clickbait headline, people will not, really pay any mind to it. We're not there yet. Not there yet, Stu. We believe the concept of worshiping something above you is antithetical to being a Satanist. So, we worship no gods, we have no masters, and we simply use the metaphor of Satan as a character that we model ourselves by, a figure that stands up to arbitrary authority against all odds. So we believe that is something very noble on the part of Lucifer, and we see God as a tyrant. So he is a symbol. He's a symbol of the eternal rebel.
With the God part too, what's interesting to us is we find that even objectively, God is the tyrant in the Bible. We don't see him as the good guy, even if you read it from square one and have never been indoctrinated by Christianity. You read the Bible and God is a tyrant. I mean, he punishes people for trying to have knowledge. If you go against his will, he essentially tortures you. It's kind of a domestic violence relationship with a deity. So we find that this is something that if you were to come at it from a fresh start, you would still come to that conclusion where the Luciferian character, the snake, was one interpretation was the apple was knowledge, and God said, don't do that. Or
Prometheus as well.
I'm going to give women menstrual cramps, but thorns in the ground. I mean, it's completely absurd.
So, you can even take the story of Prometheus, where he stole fire from the gods to give to humans and then was punished for eternity. So it's a really interesting parallel that you could see in a completely different culture. As I said, Satan is literary, not literal. We're trying to break up the misconceptions about good and evil. We believe that, that's just a general term for a set of characteristics that people just find unpalatable or unsavory. So when people call us evil, well, what does that really mean? You have people at the pulpit who are molesting children, and they're considered good because they're religious, but they're calling us evil, and we take that. We take the position of the scapegoat and we wear it proudly. I think that's what separates us from other people, is that we own up to it. We've been called Satanist. If you stand here godless, you've probably been considered a Satanist before. You've been demonized by your own community. Being that we are attracted to the satanic figure, we own up to Satanism, to the label that we've been given, and we call ourselves Satanists.
And partially, one of the reasons for that is we see Christianity. We're always called, do you sacrifice children? We get all these stupid questions all the time. And if you look at Christianity, it's a blood cult. It's a human sacrifice cult, because they believe that you tortured and killed this guy. And now that worked. Because of that, there was a positive result where we're all forgiven. And then to commemorate that, you eat the body and drink the blood of your deity. So who's the weird one? I mean, that's kind of what we do. We turn that upside down by just saying, think about this rationally, think about this objectively, and then ask yourself what's good and evil.
Mm-hmm. So so Satanists can also be humanists. Not all humanists are Satanists, obviously. What separates us and what unifies us as Satanists is the embracement of our outsider status, as I was saying. We adhere to the principles of individual sovereignty, and we reject tyrannical authority. And in all ways, through our activism, in our everyday lives, we are the masters of our own destinies, and nobody can take that away from us. And these concerns are very important to us, when you have the looming theocracy in our government, putting restrictions on our bodies, putting restrictions on where we can congregate. There's all these things that, we get discriminated against as Satanists. And, this is not just us. This is any minority voice, any minority religion. People without religion, it's almost as if, having a faith in the supernatural gives you more rights than not, and we find that very abhorrent. So, as we have shown you, we have the 7 tenets, and that is basically the guiding principles, a code of conduct, a philosophy that we follow to reach our own personal enlightenment. Another thing is we have rituals. We do have satanic rituals, which, and the iconography that goes along with it, and we use those rituals as commemorative moments in time to celebrate our individuality, to exalt ourselves in our thinking. Like, it's just a great community activity that we can do. So, real quick instance, we did a destruction ritual where we destroyed an object that gave us pain, a note from an ex, pictures that, of memories that hurt your mind and your heart. It's just something that has been holding on to you for so long. So we destroyed it in a ritual, and we chanted, we do not belong to these things. These things belong to me, and destroyed it, throw it in a fire. And it was extremely cathartic and therapeutic for a lot of people, because we were all there sharing this moment where we're going to let go of this pain and own up to it and get past it. So it was extremely wonderful. That separates us from a lot, of the secularists and the humanists, and the atheists. They define themselves by what they aren't, like their lack of belief. And we define ourselves by what we are and what we do believe in. And, our community is extremely important to us. In Arizona, we've managed to create a really wonderful satanic community, and it's ever growing with, our campaigns and with the charitable works that we're doing. Hold on, I lost my place. So we have this sense of identity and shared values, which a lot of people really, it means a lot to some people. When they discover Satanism, they see it as a coming home moment where, it's something that they've always believed in but never quite had a name for. And once they discover this community, it's extremely self-empowering for some people. So we welcome those. We welcome the free thinkers that, have been an outsider their whole lives. So.
And I think in that it's important to note that we don't recruit or convert. It's a coming home religion. And here, what is blasphemy other than a really good time? So the reason blasphemy is important to us is the whole concept of a lot of laws that were created, especially in the old days and in other countries, was that it was an offense against God. And being that there is no God, what it really is an offense against people. And often it's an offense against people in power, because they're the ones trying to tell you what you can and cannot do, whether it's from the pulpit or from an emperor or from a president. Blasphemy is a concept used by people that want to rule others. And to us, this is why we find it a very important method of self-expression, where we reject this. We're saying, look, we're not offending your God, we're offending you, and that is our right. It's freedom of expression and speech. There are no true, and in America there are no real blasphemy laws anymore for the most part. However, you see it kind of creep in with reproductive rights issues where, clearly the whole point is sex is sinful, and if you got to suffer along with your consequences and things like this. It all stems kind of from a blasphemy perspective, but it's never outright said that in this country. This is it's traditional norms that we challenge in all things, and blasphemy is one of my favorite things. It's basically a rejection of religious control mechanisms that creep into our laws and rules, even within your own family. There's a lot of social aspect to this whole thing. You can go to the next one. So the way this is applied, now we've talked about what we do, why we do it. We went through all that. So as far as legal issues are concerned, there's a number of theocratic type actions, and we've narrowed it down to 4 important ones that the Satanic Temple is actively fighting, both on the streets and in the courts. So we're going to talk about the religious defense of reproductive rights, which is basically, we'll talk about that later, but it involves a 72-hour waiting period in Missouri where you are given Christian literature to basically shame and guilt you out of getting the abortion. We had a waiver for that, where I say this is against one of our tenets, that our body is inviolable. Of course, they didn't respect that, and actually just this week, they argued it in the state court, our attorney in Missouri, and then there's a federal argument next week. We'll get into that later. The other thing is the invocation campaigns, and what we found that was shocking to us is we thought these were isolated incidents where you have city council meetings that are opened with 99% Judeo-Christian prayers. How our chapter started was we asked to give one in the City of Phoenix City Council, which created a 6-hour meltdown where people were weeping, saying that Michelle here was going to bring down demons from the sky. I mean, it resembled a 12th century witch hunt. I mean, it was unbelievable that this is happening in this day and age. I mean, people were holding holy water and crosses to give our 2-minute speech on rational thought. It was horribly offensive to them. Eventually they shut that down. That's something we're going to talk about also. And then later, Charlize Blythe is going to talk about our after-school Satan Club, which was created due to the evangelical presence in public schools, where they're essentially proselytizing children as daycare. And this is happening in public schools all over the country and in Tucson, Phoenix, everywhere else. So this is our essentially counter to that, to give working class parents another option. And that went over great too when people heard that was coming. The last and most tangible subject are the monuments. I think this causes a visceral reaction from people because you can actually see it. We've got a several thousand-pound bronze statue of Baphomet that whenever a Ten Commandments is erected, we offer to add to the pluralism cause and put it right next to it. So we'll talk about that later also.
All right. So as we were been discussing, we worship through activism. Activism is a very important part of our legitimate expression of personal independence. We believe that there is nothing more satanic than standing up to the man, than standing up to arbitrary authority against all odds. Self-preservation is paramount in our lives, but at the same time, being a selfish person that only thinks about themselves is not going to change any of these laws. We need to band together. We need to take a stand. We need to make our voices heard. And make sure that our government is not discriminated against not just us, but any minority viewpoint, in favor of Christianity. So we denounce archaic and outdated mechanisms, and we do believe that faith should be criticized. Nothing should not be taken without any kind of questioning. We have to question everything. And as I said, if you stand here godless, unashamed of your sexuality, a woman, part of the LGBT community, you too have been considered a Satanist. And whether or not you are doesn't really matter, because this is what people do. They create this imaginary enemy, and they just instill fear that they're coming to get you, they're going to come and get your kids. And we're trying to break those misconceptions. We're trying to show that, as Satanists, we can still be active within our community, and we can still do good things. So we were established. The official establishment, I guess, would be 2014, but we've been around since 2013. And let's see. One of my favorite case that we're working on is the religious reproductive rights case, which it began in Missouri, and it was started with Mary Doe, and she was a woman who was seeking an abortion, and there was only one abortion clinic, one Planned Parenthood abortion clinic it was not Planned Parenthood. It was just an abortion clinic in Missouri, and they are required to give you material that is religious in nature, not scientifically accurate, basically to shame you and make you consider not going through with this abortion. So we knew Mary was going to go to this abortion clinic, so we gave her a waiver that basically stated that these are my sincerely held religious beliefs, that one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone, and that our beliefs should conform to the best and most accurate scientific data. And this was, that Hobby Lobby case where they were using against their employees to not provide them with birth control, and they cited their sincerely held religious beliefs as the reason, and the Supreme Court said okay.
Yes, and essentially what we do is we take these theocratic measures and we turn them against them. So, we celebrate the Hobby Lobby case because now we get to use our sincerely held religious beliefs to fight the same establishment that approved that. So that's kind of one of the things we do is we remind them that when they pass laws like this and decisions like this, we remind them it doesn't only apply to you. So that's part of the cases cited in this.
We like to use what is called Lucian's Law. So we never ask for special privilege. We only ask to be included. So if the Satanists come in asking for the same rights as the Christians are, usually it's only because it's an unconstitutional privilege to begin with. So we ask for the same right, and then they usually take away the whole practice.
But this case is a little bit different, though, because essentially what was happening was part of the abortion medical process was involved with Christian propaganda. That was part of the medical process, that in order to have this medical procedure, you have to be given this stuff that talks about life at conception, which isn't everyone's religious beliefs. And if you don't do that, you can't get the abortion. And when you got one abortion clinic in the state, you either have to sit there for 3 days in a hotel, or you have to travel sometimes 4 or 5 hours back and forth. So we find this to be a substantial burden against Roe v. Wade as well. But this is ongoing. I mean, we're literally having the oral arguments in the Court of Appeals right now, this week and next week. Oh.
This is you.
So here's how we started. This is my favorite picture ever that was in the news. I call it our Mortal Kombat. So this is Lucian's Law in action. Again, we don't ask for anything to be taken out. You're never going to see the Satanic Temple say, you shouldn't have these Christian prayers in city council meetings. You're never going to see that. You're never going to see anything like that from us. But what you will see is, if you have it, we must be included. And you don't have another constitutional option. It's all or nothing. It's very basic First Amendment stuff, but you will find people fall apart when they have to face people they think they don't like. So we met, and we were asked by Lucian Greaves himself to do this. He put us together, and what ended up happening was within a couple weeks or a couple months after this, we were on Fox News, we were all over the place, and this was just this, the satanic panic, like from the 90s. I mean, it was insane. We got death threats, hate mail. That's an ongoing thing. You got to get used to that if you're part of this. And if it tells you anything, for instance, Mary Doe in the reproductive rights case, she has to protect her identity for wanting to get an abortion and being involved with us, because people will threaten to kill her. And that's what happens when you're involved in this, is when you're fighting an established thought that has kind of a chokehold on a culture, you are a threat to them, and they will react violently. So this was our first part of that one. Even this picture right here, we were giving the invocation, Michelle was, and they had us do this kind of explanation of what we were doing on live TV, and there was these scrolling messages from the public about just the most awful rape threats and murder threats, and we're just trying to talk and keep a straight face during this thing. So it was a bizarre experience, but that's how Arizona started its chapter, was through that action.
You guys want to see a video? All right. So this is just a little snippet of what the city council meeting was entailing. If we have enough time, at the end of the presentation, there's the best of, which is extremely painful to watch, but it's kind of, we should watch it.
And this started a hashtag that went viral called PrayerGate.
So, as you can tell, there's a lot of recurring statements of superstition, raining fire and brimstone and fury, and the lack of historic knowledge. It's just they keep bringing up, the money thing. The
dollar bill. Invariably, someone whips out a dollar bill.
Always.
And says, look, we're one nation under God, not even having any knowledge of what the context of that is.
The city council will not.
Is there? It's coming out of the.
And if you turn it up on here as well, on your laptop.
Not allow a satanic prayer at an upcoming.
All right, well, it's not coming through the HDMI, so we'll just move the mic close to the laptop.
Meeting. Instead, there will be a moment of silent prayer. Joe Dana from our sister station in Phoenix was there for tonight's heated debate. It's a story that's new at 10.
Look, every city council member here tonight expressed their disagreement with Satanism, but they say they had a dilemma. Rewrite prayer practices to prevent a Satanist from praying here on the 17th, while also making the city vulnerable to a lawsuit, or take away public prayers altogether and avoid lawsuits. Preventing a Satanist's prayer, a reason to celebrate for some members of mainstream religions,
is a victory on our city.
but for others, the vote a defeat.
That's what this whole thing is about, really, political correctness. And you know what? Trying to take God out of everything.
It was an all or nothing approach. In the end, the council voting for nothing, led by Mayor Greg Stanton.
Not even 2 years ago, the justices on the Supreme Court, including conservative justices Roberts and Alito, stated clearly what the Constitution demands of cities like ours, that when it comes to prayer, we can't discriminate against minority or unpopular faiths.
Beginning tomorrow, no prayers will be allowed to open city council meetings. Instead, moments of silent prayer only. Council members relying largely on advice from the city's attorney. Councilman Sal DeCiccio, the most vocal opponent of the measure.
Because I want to give you hope. I want you to walk out of here knowing that this is not going to stop tonight if we lose this vote.
But several council members had harsh words towards DeCiccio, who suggested that supporting a moment of silence was to advocate for Satanists.
And when my colleagues attack us and my faith, that's very personal.
That was Joe Dana reporting. The councilwoman who sponsored the moment of silent prayer rule said she didn't want the city paying out $500,000 in legal fees and lawsuits when there are more important issues to deal with.
This was not over there. What ended up happening was kind of crazy. I mean, there was actually a meeting where Sal DeCiccio accused his own city attorney of being in league with the Satanists.
Yeah.
I mean, these witch hunt style things are alive and well in today's society, and it's crazy. What ended up happening was they went to basically what's called a chaplain system. So one of the great ironies of this is whenever they take the prayer out or whatever, they always claim victory. So they pull the rug from under themselves, as I always say, and then they're like, look, we win, because we fell on our face, but at least those guys aren't here.
Yeah. And the chaplain-based system can either be from the fire department or from the police department.
Yeah, I'm actually going to discuss that later. There's a reason why that was legal, but
yeah. But as you heard, the Laura Pastor, she's saying that we're attacking her faith.
No, she's saying DeCiccio was attacking her.
No, she just said it. She was crying, and she's like, when they come in and attack my faith. And when we're just asking to be included, they consider it an attack just because they have to tolerate other viewpoints that they disagree with. And it was certainly a witch hunt, and there was a lot of dangerous slander, about, both Stu and myself. We were called horrible names. We were called a hate group. And it was just awful to see 6 hours.
6 hours of us being called a hate group.
6 hours.
We were called terrorists for even asking. It was nuts.
Oh, well, here, let's see another video. No, how do I go to the next slide?
I have to click out of the embedded video to get it.
Oh, there you go.
Cool. All right, let's do one more video. Oh.
Yeah, we could go a little bit in on that one, I think.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It started at 59. You're right.
You got to click on that, on the link. I remember that.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, you're like, you see this stuff, you're like, is this real life?
This Sunday square off, I'm Graham Resnick. In a
Didn't we
matter
go
of
in?
1 week, a decades-old tradition
Just
of
didn't
public
explain
prayer before the City of Phoenix council meetings was history. In its place, a moment of silent public prayer.
I think it was 15.
Some shift was a reaction to a scheduled invocation speaker, members of the Satanic Temple in Tucson. Members say they don't worship Satan. To them, the devil's a symbol of the ultimate rebel. 4 council members, though, vowed to block their appearance. By the end of a packed council meeting Wednesday, the 4 had succeeded, but not in the way they intended. The Satanic Temple wouldn't speak on February 17th, but neither would anyone else. The moment of silent prayer took effect immediately, but now a top Arizona Republican is is threatening a recall against council members who back the silent prayer, and one council member is vowing to take public prayer to a city-wide vote. Joining us, a Phoenix council member at the center of this storm, where you'll usually find him, Sal DeCiccio of District 6. Hi, Bram. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Let's talk about that debate last week. It was intense, to put it mildly. You have demonized fellow council members on the issue. You accused the city attorney of rigging the vote for the moment of silence. Do you regret anything you said as part of that debate?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, it's all true. Here's what happened. None of the demonization. What you've got here, you've got politicians making it personal toward themselves. What I questioned was the decision. I didn't question their faith. They brought that up. I questioned the decision-making process of what they went through. Now, let me give you just a little bit.
You did tweet politically correct Phoenix politicians pushing satanic prayer. Who was pushing satanic prayer?
Well, the mayor and another council member were. And let me read you a quote exactly. They're pushing this. I just believe we're a diverse society and we have prayer. We welcome all points of view, welcoming it. They were pushing that. No, let's go back to what occurred this entire month here. So what you got, look, and it's a question of what's happening in the city of Phoenix, and it's a question of decision making that's occurring there, Bram. In the last month, we've seen the city of Phoenix raise water rates.
I know you want to make a broader issue, but I really want to talk about
I'm
this
going
issue.
to, but I'm going to finish this too. But we have Sheraton Hotel, $50 million loss there. And then they banned a prayer that's been around for 65 years. All I could think about when I was on the dais up there was thinking, here it is, they're going to ban nonchalantly a prayer, a tradition that the city of Phoenix has had for over 65 years.
I think anybody who watched knows that wasn't nonchalant. That was pretty intense. You have council members being told there will be retribution, divine retribution. I wouldn't call that nonchalant.
I didn't see that.
You had, well, I saw it. Councilmember Laura Pastor, crying as she explained her vote. This was a really tough meeting. But let's go.
That's the last minute though too. They pushed the agenda to ban the prayer at the last minute. No public notice, no public transparency.
You put
just
the
like
agenda item on at the last minute.
Well, 24
hours before.
No, we put it on. We sent a letter. No, let's go back.
No, I know. I saw it. There's a placeholder for it.
Well,
24 hours before. Let's jump ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
And Stu de Haan of the Satanic Temple. Here's what he said after the meeting. All they had to do was let us do our 2-minute invocation and let us walk out the door. They were so willing to do everything they could to stop us. They pulled the rug out from under everybody. Isn't he right? You were so determined to keep them out that the unintended consequence was no public prayer.
Bram, you wouldn't let ISIS come in and get over. Well, ISIS is evil. What is Satan? I think most people would say that Satan is. If I were to ask your viewers right now,
You cannot compare these guys to. That's over.
No, Satanists. They're devil worshippers.
No, they're not.
They're going to be.
Have you read what they said?
No, of course he hasn't.
Have you talked to them? Have you read what they
Do
said?
you really want to get into a debate of what a Satanist is and it isn't? I'm going to take you to what they say. That is evil.
They do not call
That's not healthy.
We could
Cut it.
stop it. Okay, so
Do you really want to get in this, or do you want?
the reason I like playing this video is it demonstrates how, people are like, who gives a shit about a 2-minute prayer at a city council meeting? Well, you can see the bigger issue here. You can see that the Constitution is offensive to them. When you've got an attorney for the city that represents them saying we need to uphold constitutional values, he says that's literally evil if it applies to someone he doesn't like. And these are people in power. So the things that we do that seem small have a much bigger purpose and it exposes a lot of hypocrisy, and that's part of our goal. What ended up happening, I'll just talk about a little bit of the case law here. With the chaplain system is this was actually litigated in the United States Supreme Court. That chaplain system's been around since George Washington. So even though we still think that's an Establishment Clause issue, chaplains are supposed to be multi-denominational and stuff. Of course, what ends up happening is it's Abrahamic religions for the most part are going to be represented. But that's the reason we didn't sue them, is we thought that would be shaky grounds because this was litigated. Even though it's not the most, not our favorite outcome, we at least got them legal. Mm-hmm. This one is, I'm hesitant to talk too much about it because this might actually end up in litigation, is we did the same thing in Scottsdale. They just told us to get lost. They didn't even have a city council meeting on it, really. And then they bragged about it in a flyer to get reelected. So Mayor Lane sent out, and you probably can't see much here, but basically it says the best thing that he's done since he's been in office, and one of them was to stop the Satanists. So again, if you look at that objectively, he's bragging as one of his greatest achievements as mayor is to discriminate against the minority religion.
Mm-hmm. And then they replaced our invocation in Scottsdale with a Christian organization.
So yeah, this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with all the time. Here's the letter we got, essentially, if you want to read it real quick. I'm not going to read it to you, but it's basically they made this pretext saying are only given by representative institutions that have a substantial connection to Scottsdale. There was no application. There was no question. Anyone who asked is put on it. So this was clearly pretext based on nothing, and that's part of the issue.
They didn't bother to ask us if we had any members in Scottsdale. So.
Which we do, of course.
Of course we do.
This is a great quote by one of the city council members up there. So I do not welcome a Satanist group. They said they would walk out and leave if we came, and to that we say, okay.
So I mean, like the CCO, like CLAP, like all these politicians, they pander to their audience, you know, by saying how they're going to discriminate against us, just to get their base going. Yeah, they're stopping the Satanists. Like when we're just screenshotting everything and using it later. So thank you for providing the best evidence to show what your true intentions are.
And we actually currently have public records requests in their internal emails, so we'll see what that turns up with. And the only reason I bring up the Boston invocation is to kind of demonstrate how, even though it looks similar on its face, there's a lot of nuances to these issues because in Boston they have a different system where they don't have groups apply to get an invocation. They actually have the city council members themselves request various people to give the invocations. So what you basically have is a regional theocracy because whatever religions you have in the city council is pretty much all that's going to be represented. So this is yet another issue that we might be facing in the future. And the only reason to bring it up, we have this all over the country, but they're all very different. It's never the same twice. And now we will talk about Grey Faction, and Shalise Blythe, who is a member of that, will talk about that.
This one here? Okay, can people hear me? Cool, thank you. Thank you, Michelle and Stu, for letting me talk about this. My name is Shalise Blythe. I'm a member of the National Council for the Satanic Temple, and I'm also the National Director for the After School Satan Club, which I'll also be talking about. But these two campaigns I'd like to talk about are more on the national level. So they're sponsored more by the Satanic Temple on the national level, and they're not necessarily sponsored by one individual chapter. It's wide. So Grey Faction is a very complicated thing to talk about, so I'm going to try and gloss over it as much as I can, as best I can, to try and be very succinct. But if you guys have any questions about anything I talk about on the subject, feel free to ask me afterwards or ask questions that you have. So, who all remembers the Satanic Panic? Are you guys familiar with the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s? Okay, so for those of you who are unfamiliar, America went through this amazing phenomenon known as the Satanic Panic. It was a moral panic, started in the 80s, went into the 90s, and everyone just assumes that it's dead, long gone. It was just this, stain of a certain time and period, and it's long gone, but it absolutely is not. The Satanic Panic related to claims of satanic ritualized sexual abuse and mind control. This all started for various reasons. There was a major shift in American culture. Evangelicalism was on the rise. Social and political conservatism were very popular, and everyone was just in this, hysteria of kind of coming to grips with the big shift in America culturally and politically. So what really kicked this this whole satanic panic off was a book that was published. It's called Michelle Remembers, and it was written by a man called Lawrence Pastor. And Michelle Remembers is a book that was written as nonfiction. That was the intent, but this was so discredited that the only thing that was true in that book was the fact that his name was Lawrence Pastor. And Michelle Remembers is about a client that he had, who he eventually married, by the way. And she came in having some issues. She was seeking a therapist, and through hypnosis, through repressed memory therapy, which is, again, very heavily debunked, she started remembering all of these past traumas of Satanists ritualistically abusing her, a part of this big, wide network of Satanists who breed babies just to sacrifice, and, being sold to celebrities across the country as sex slaves, and all this terrible, terrible stuff. And this is all done with this very debunked form of therapy, and which was really popular back in the day, especially after this. But it's so fringe. It's very fringe, and the only people who believe in it are people that claim to be mind controlled themselves. So, take that for what that is. So, this goes into So this whole thing of satanic ritual abuse, kind of gets its start there, and then people taking this as, oh, this must be real. People seeing the Satanists as these evil things, and when Anton LaVey came out with the Church of Satan in the 60s, people knew that Satanists were out there. I mean, they were kind of in popular culture. They were kind of the hot new thing back then. So, there being Satanists around was very real. But the accusations of this were not. This became known as, there was accusations of satanic ritual abuse, the only way people could remember it was through repressed memory therapy. So the idea being that people suffered so much trauma that the only way that they were able to deal with it was that they'd repress it, develop multiple personalities to kind of cope with the different personalities would cope with the develop to protect the mind and stuff like that. And that goes into multiple personality disorder. It's now known as dissociative identity disorder, and it's again, I can't really go into the specifics of it because it's really nuanced and difficult to talk about. But multiple personality disorder, DID, that's all related to these satanic ritual abuse claims. And so across the country, you'd see these accusations of school children going to daycares, and someone says, "Oh, my kid's being satanic ritually abused," and then the police would get involved, and all these crazy claims were coming out, and people were going to prison. People were being put on trial. They were putting all this money and defending themselves against these claims that were never true. And people did go to prison. And we actually there was Fran and Dan Keller. They ran a daycare. They were convicted based on these claims, and they only just now got out of prison. Only just within the last couple of years. So. And this isn't to say. So you hear that and you wonder, well, how could anyone believe this? It's so crazy. I mean, the accusations go, into the absolute, mythological, where someone talks about, well, yeah, all this stuff happened to me, but God Himself came down and removed the scars, and this all the divine intervention, and they're talking about baby breeding farms, and animal porn, dolphin porn, and apparently all the big celebrities of the day were in on it. These. It's fucking stupid. So anyway,
Sorry.
So anyway, this all happens, and it was a big thing back in the 80s and 90s, and everyone just assumes it went away. This fringe science starts there, multiple personality disorder, which was turned into dissociative identity disorder. Everyone thinks that these claims, the phenomenon, that it just stayed in the past. But unfortunately, the people that were a part of it, helped start it and carry it on, they're still in practice today, and it's very much alive in the mental health fields. Because of that, Grey Faction is a campaign of the Satanic Temple comprised of individuals concerned with the impact of the satanic panic, not only from the past but in present day, and the pseudoscience in the mental health care practices and cultural mores. So what we do is we investigate known and suspected perpetrators of discredited conspiracy theories which motivate witch hunts in the justice system and mental health fields. So you have these doctors that they all quote each other. That's the thing. I mean, these people that still push in the professional setting the existence of these satanic cults, doing ritualistic murder, ritualistic abuse, all this stuff. They still exist, and somebody will go into their office and say anything from I have depression, I have anxiety, I don't know where it is. They'll go into their office, going for treatment, and then they come out with multiple personality disorder and thinking that they were part of a satanic cult. So this kind of therapy is pushed. So the ISSTD, they are it is the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Disassociation, and it was founded in 1983 by the very same people who pushed these claims of satanic ritual abuse and these multiple personality disorder diagnostics related to SRA claims. And we have such an axe to grind with them simply because they keep pushing it. And they offer continuing educational credits that, for any therapist who goes to these conferences, and they're pushing these ideas on people. So what ends up happening is these therapists go there, they see these as valid because, it's the ISSTD, and we're getting continuing education credits, so it must be real. So they take it at face value, and they go back and they use this on their patients. And it ends up traumatizing their patients. I mean, we have all these stories from these victims that come to us telling us their stories about how they went to these therapists seeking help, and that ensued. There ensued years and years of being drugged, of being imprisoned in psych wards, of being abused and being made to believe that they were a part of these, satanic cults, and all these terrible things happened to them. And the problem is that they use what they call repressed memory therapy, and we have proof, we have transcripts of those who claim to be victims of satanic ritual abuse were actually coerced or directed by their therapists. The McMartin preschool trial is a very good example of little children being coerced by mental health professionals into making claims that were not true. These people go in, they're heavily medicated, they really don't know what reality is anymore, and these memories are implanted into them. They're not going in with some kind of vague idea of something, and then through therapy they're like, oh, this is what happened. No, like they go in and they're initially like, no, this never happened, but it's their therapist. They're supposed to know what they're doing, right? And if they're so drugged and they're kind of locked away from the rest of the world, I mean, after a long time, you eventually believe it. So what we do with Grey Faction is we report on these people, of these known and suspected people who push this stuff onto their patients, and they continue letting it be a part of mainstream mental health care. And a good example, one of the best examples we have, and one thing that we're trying to make people know about, Justice for Jude. So Jude Mira was a little boy. He was severely autistic, and his mother, Gigi Jordan, came to believe that his autism wasn't just a genetic disorder, had nothing to do with that. She came to believe that his autism was actually a manifestation of satanic ritual abuse. And this idea of hers was solidified when she met with a woman named Ellen Lachter. And Ellen Lachter is you can go onto our website and you can see just the atrocious bullshit that she pushes on her patients and she writes about. She believes in cults and systematic abuse and everything like that. So, this woman who is completely distraught goes to Ellen Lachter and comes out believing that her son is actually a victim of abuse. So she ends up murdering her child, believing that it was a mercy killing. She, fed him a cocktail of vodka and sleeping pills, and evidence suggests that she also smothered him. And she did this because of this belief. And so when we talk about, the satanic panic being very much alive, I mean, this case with Jude Mira, I mean, that's a perfect example of why we fight and do these things, because it's not only to tell the stories of the victims back from like the 80s and 90s and, the people that are coming out saying, this is what's going on, but a little boy died. A little boy lost his life because, somebody decided to push this idea into this, very disturbed woman's mind. And, that to us is absolutely reprehensible. So we do a lot of, protests in front of the ISSTD whenever they hold their conferences. We write reports on these people. We use, we're teamed up with Muck Rock, and they do a lot of freedom for information requests. Trying to get transcripts and stuff like that from these doctors to try and say, they're on record citing this insane bullshit. So if you have any more questions about that, you can ask me later. I try to be, I hope that was understandable. But anyway, that's Grey Faction. And now, After School Satan. Oh, sorry, that forming is a little crazy.
Can I mention one thing about the Grey Faction stuff real quick? One thing that she mentioned was the Kellers being released from prison, the daycare people. I wanted to add that not only were they released, I think it was, how long did they do, the Kellers?
They were over
21 years.
21 years in prison. They were pardoned afterwards and given millions and millions of dollars from the state because it was so atrocious. So when we learn things about the satanic panic and this, it's mostly how not to investigate a crime. They actually now teach classes on how not to coerce children as witnesses because of incidents like this from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. And the McMartin preschool case is another example of that as well. So, all right, After School Satan Club. This one's fun to talk about because it's, again, seeing a need to make people aware of the there's no such thing as separation of church and state anymore. So it is our extracurricular program for public schools. Our goal is to provide a strongly needed alternative to evangelical groups proselytizing in public schools. Proselytization in public schools, what are you talking about? Kids go to school and they go to learn and, they learn about religious teachings at home or in their churches. Well, that's absolutely not the case anymore. Thanks to the Good News Clubs or the Child Evangelism Fellowship. Good News Club, so this all started because there's a group called the Good News Clubs, and they're an evangelical-based after-school program that use our public schools, after normal class, to proselytize and recruit children. So, they're told in a very personal way that they are sinful, wicked, deceitful, and deserving of punishment, death, and an eternity of suffering in hell. They strive to train children to evangelize to other children to bring them into their religious thinking. This methodology proves to be an effective way to amass a congregation willing to blindly follow out of fear that's been instilled in them from an early age. So it's preying on children. And so I can probably, and this all became possible because of the Good News Club versus Milford Central School. This was a Supreme Court, this was a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And it was actually incredibly smart. I say smart not because I mean that they're smart people. I mean that they went about it in such a way that it wasn't a freedom of a religion issue, it was a freedom of speech issue. So they went to, they sued on the basis of you're hindering our free speech in a public forum, because public schools, they're considered a limited public forum, and they were denied entry into a New York school, Milford Central, because the school district saw the application. They're like, well, this is a religious proselytizing group. Like, no, you can't come here. Because that's a separation of church and state. So they took that case all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in their favor. So now, because of that, they're all over. They're all over the United States, and they keep growing and growing and growing. So, because we love the idea of separation of church and state, we decided that it was a good idea to challenge that. And if people still wanted religion in schools, then, we say, okay, well, let's offer an alternative. So, the Satanic Temple being a non-theistic religious organization, we promote common sense, justice, rational inquiry, critical thinking, and basing one's understanding of the world on the best available scientific evidence. Obviously, we use Satan as a metaphor, and all the values that we base upon are the way we live our lives. Are I think universal. I think everyone can kind of use that. So we saw the merit of exposing children to these deeply held beliefs that we have to complement and contrast those being taught by the evangelical group. So we created our own after-school Satan Club, and our goal is to create this alternative where kids can learn about science, creative learning. So we use science, creative learning, songs, art projects, and educational stories. And what we do is we teach them about basic critical reasoning, problem solving, character qualities, and creative expression. So we're not actually teaching Satanism. Our goal, we don't proselytize, we don't try to recruit people, especially children. Our goal is to take what we as Satanists use in our lives and use that to teach kids, because it's universal. I mean, you can be I guess you could be a Christian and think that, basic critical reasoning and stuff like that, you can apply that to your lives. So it's not specific to any, one kid who's either religious or non-religious. Any kid can be a part of the club. And, so we get the question a lot, why Satan? Why call it Satan? So if you're club and you're not teaching Satanism, and your goal is just to provide an alternative to complement and contrast the evangelical groups, why not call it something else? Well, it wouldn't be better to call it a humanist or a skeptic or anything else club, because we wholeheartedly disagree with this notion that we should sanitize ourselves or sell ourselves as anything other than who we are. So the whole point of calling it After School Satan accomplishes two different things. It's we think that a counterbalance of a satanic club is absolutely necessary. They created that need. We didn't go in there and say we want Satanist clubs. The evangelicals said we want our stuff in the clubs, and we said, okay, well, us too. So for children to see and understand that quote unquote blasphemy, the names and the iconography can be utilized by good people without repercussions, it sends them a positive message encouraging their critical examination and free thought. So, the word using Satan not only helps them kind of see it as not the scary thing, but be like, oh, they're Satanists, but they're just like you and me. They're just as lame, and they play D&D and they do this dumb stuff just like I do. But it also makes people question whether or not they want religion in schools anyway. We know the shock factor. We absolutely see it, and it's a really good way for us to not only be very out and open about who we are, but we think that, especially with the reaction we've been getting, do you want religion in schools? Do you want religious groups in schools at all? So, when we first announced this club, we really wanted people to ask that question. And, we were prepared to see this go anyway. If we submitted our applications and we were like, okay, it would be really great if they decided that no religious groups should be in the schools, and so they would basically say no religious clubs in our schools anyway. But as we saw last year, 3 of our clubs were actually accepted, so we had both. There were we had Portland, Oregon, we had Tacoma, Washington, and of all things, Salt Lake City, Utah. So, so they completely understood that they had a choice, and they decided to follow the law, which is great. But unfortunately, there were some that decided not to, and Tucson being one of them. We also had some denied applications in LA and Atlanta, so we're looking at our legal options for that currently. But immediately upon the request of the Satanic Temple to have the same privileges as the group. So Matt Staver is the spokesperson for what's it called?
Liberty Council.
Liberty Council, yeah. So the Liberty Council, they're the ones that actually litigated the case and got the Good News Clubs into the schools in the first place. They also represented Kim Davis, if you guys remember her. So, he when we were first announced, he just denounced us as illegitimate, nothing more than a disruption. And obviously not having seen our curriculum or knowing anything about the program was just completely dismissive and said, oh, this is just going to go away. They're just trying to cause problems. But we did have very successful enrollment last year. And now we are opening our doors to volunteers. So I hope you guys love this graphic as much as I do. It was done by our local guy, Wonka Nix. So thank you, Wonka, for doing this. I'm in love with it. So this year we are opening up our doors to volunteers. So before, when we had our after-school Satan program, it was only available to people within the operating Satanic Temple chapters to, put them in their area where there were good news clubs. But we got so much, support from people who they didn't have a chapter in their area, but they're like, oh, we love this. Like, we have a good news club and we fucking hate it. And, we see the value in this, and we really like to offer this alternative. So what we decided to do was to let people apply to have the after school Satan program in their schools that didn't have the geographical restraint of having a chapter there. So they apply, they get the background checks, they do all these things, per law and per the requirements. You're dealing with children, so you want to make sure, good people are teaching the curriculum. But, we think it's a really good way to really counteract what we're seeing in these schools. And so if you're interested, anybody who's interested, they can, email us at info@afterschoolsatan.com. And one thing I'd like to, I didn't quite address this, but one thing that I think is really important to take out of the After School Satan Club is, this idea that we don't want religion in schools, period, the end. And the only reason we're doing this is because the evangelical groups created that need. They went in there, they turned the public schools into a pulpit, and we saw this as being abhorrent. You keep your religious beliefs in the home, you keep them in your churches. You don't recruit kids where they're supposed to learn. And so the after-school Satan clubs, we don't want them everywhere. If somebody, we've gotten some requests to have them in places where there are no good news clubs, and those applications are going to be denied simply because, well, you guys don't have that need there. You have a school that, yeah, I'm sure having a program like this would be great to teach all of these values, but you don't have those evangelicals in there recruiting your children. So we exist to just have something that's an alternative for the good news clubs. But if you have a school that doesn't have a religious group in there, then we obviously don't want to be the only ones in there, if that makes sense. So there's that. So thank you for that, and I'll turn it back to Stu.
I don't know how much you guys want to hear from us. How are we in time? What do we got? You guys want to hear more, or we got more stuff here? I could go quickly. We got the monuments campaigns, and like I said in the beginning, these are very tangible, meaning we're physically putting something somewhere. We have 2 monuments built right now. One of them is our main monument, which is the Baphomet that we petition to be put places when there is a 10 Commandments monument. And then this is our war memorial, because generally veterans memorials are crosses. And there's a lot of people in the armed forces that are secular, atheists, of all kinds of various religions, and we even have a satanic contingency as well.
Yeah, it's to the point where there's been cases where some veteran cemeteries have just been blanketed with Christian icons without the consideration that maybe not all the soldiers there are part of that faith. So we definitely want to have our satanic veterans represented, and we'll talk a little bit more about what the monument means.
And the Baphomet, a lot of us joined the Satanic Temple when we saw this thing. I mean, the first time I saw it, it was like a drawing on a piece of paper. But what I noticed immediately was that the Baphomet didn't have breasts, which historically that image is always hermaphroditic. It's half male, half female, half animal, half human. It points to the ground and the sky. So it's kind of our yin and yang. It's a reconciliation of opposites. But when I saw that it didn't have breasts, I knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't want to have an obscenity objection. So you don't want to fight this entire constitutional battle on Establishment Clause grounds, and then it gets taken out because it's got tits on it. I mean, it's not a debate we want to get embroiled in. But when I first saw it, I knew exactly why that was, and I was like, this group is savvy, and that's kind of how I first got attention to it. Anyway, this was supposed to go up in Oklahoma. Eventually, that didn't happen. They took down their own 10 Commandments, of course, claimed victory. Lucian Greaves gave a scathing statement against the then Attorney General in Oklahoma, who was Scott Pruitt. And then we like to joke, jokes on us, because now he got elevated to the to the cabinet of Trump, of course, because this guy's incompetent. And Lucian's last statement was, "We win, fuck you," because he was such an asshole about the whole thing. So this isn't over yet, because now we have our good friend, Senator Jason Rapert, who introduced a bill that the 10 Commandments is going to go in front of Arkansas. And in that bill, part of the law says this isn't a violation of Establishment Clause. So it's completely absurd. It's something that's never happened before, where you have two competing monuments at the same time in the application process. That's never been litigated before. You have situations where it's been sitting there for 40 years before someone comes along and is sufficiently offended, so to speak. So this is legislative approval system. We requested that ours be legislatively approved. We were told to go to hell, and to quote them on that, so I will. And this is going to be, this is definitely going to go to the courts, though it was delayed because within 12 hours of the placement of the 10 Commandments, a crazy Christian bowled over it with his car, mooting the case, but at the same time, emboldening Mr. Rapert to build it bigger and better, as they always say. And I just heard that the thing was reinstalled, and I didn't even know because it's been very quiet. So we'll see what happens here, but there seems to be this idea that religious liberty, this overarching thought that there's a monopoly on Christian iconography, and we're here to demonstrate that that's not true. Oops.
What'd you do?
Okay, so an interesting aspect I will go over briefly is what their tactic was in this situation to prevent us from having a public comments hearing. So the way the system used to be on the public grounds is you basically have an architect look at it. Is it the right height? Is it the right weight? Does it fit somewhere? You know, the basic logistics of the thing. And you have to pay for that, of course. We had in the inspection, it was found to be sound. There was a plot for it. From there, you're supposed to have a public comments hearing. Well, as we see from the Phoenix City Council, this often devolves into a mess, and there's public outrage and protesters on both sides. So what they did was they passed an emergency bill to have the order of operations switched to block us from having a public comments hearing. So now what you have to do is start with legislative approval, and the pretext of that was, well, we don't want people to spend a bunch of money and then not get legislative approval. Which is logically sound. However, we know the reason we did it was prevent this middle step, which was going to be just a gigantic meltdown publicly. And here we have a picture of Lucian Greaves making his argument to the legislatures there. So we'll kind of wrap it up at this part with a couple funny comics that were in the Arkansas newspaper. This one is great because it's the new and improved. I am the Lord thy God. If you can read this, you are too close. So the joke, of course, here is like, look at the measures that have to be taken to have this basically this icon of one's religion to basically be a representative that ours is more important than everyone else's, which is essentially what this is. And now, you know, he's talking about safety measures and putting a wall around it and just ridiculous stuff for something that shouldn't even be there. So, you know, obviously everyone's having a heyday with this. And I say to be continued because, as I said, this is only just beginning. And they reinstalled it. I haven't even seen pictures of the new reinstallation. But what we do next is definitely going to make national headlines.
Here's a comic for our Belle Plaine Veterans Memorial. And it's kind of ironic because we basically use the same arguments that the Christians have used to gain their religious privilege over other groups. So, you know, we built our own monument after the Freedom from Religion Foundation asked us to do so. You know, they opened an open forum to keep Joe, which was a soldier kneeling before a cross. You know, somebody complained, they removed the cross, and you know, they brought it back after they made the open forum. So the Freedom from Religion Foundation asked if we had a monument. We had one built, and the cube, you know, it's supposed to, you know, represent the four corners of the world. The upturned soldier's helmet is a nice place for people to leave like memorabilia, like a note to a fallen soldier, fruit. We call it the Baphometic Bowl of Wisdom. And eventually we were not able to put our Veterans Memorial because they just decided to remove the cross and all monuments completely. So
this situation was extremely ironic for a number of reasons. You know, as you can see the little quote there, it's an insult to the vets who fought for our freedom to worship one of the officially permitted religions. Which, you know, the whole concept of fighting for liberty is the concept of those that you disagree with also have the same freedoms. Another layer of irony is the reason they got their cross put up is they opened up what they call the free speech area. And then when we try to exercise our free speech, they shut down the free speech area. So, you know, and then of course they ran back and claim victory. And, you know, if that helps you sleep well at night, go for it.
Sure.
So anyway, yeah, we kind of blasted to the end there, but we've been talking for a long time.
We're open to questions, and if there's still time and you guys want to watch that Phoenix City Council meltdown, we will gladly play it. So,
all right, 6 minutes of pain. Get ready.
All right, so question. I saw a hand back there in the green.
Hold on a second. If you guys have questions, please come up to the two mics that I'm going to place at the ends of the aisles so that everybody can hear you speak.
All right.
We're going to set up a wireless mic too if anybody isn't able to walk up.
And feel free to stick around after. We have a merch table with some shirts and other merchandise, and then we will also be having a gathering at Tall Boys on 4th Avenue, and y'all are welcome come. So, go ahead. Question?
Yeah, I have one.
Sure.
Thanks for coming, by the way.
Thanks for having us.
The badge. Oh, okay. Better?
Yeah.
Okay. The movement, if you will, or the panic in the 80s and 90s, I was thinking it kind of sounded like, to me, the Red Scare of the 50s. Does anybody see any parallels there?
It was right after the Cold War.
Yeah.
So we needed a new enemy. We had to make it internal.
Right.
I mean, there is absolutely parallels to the Cold War situation. And the way it manifested itself, especially if you're around our age in your 30s, where, you know, when someone threatened to burn your Metallica t-shirt or your Dungeons and Dragons stuff, that was like the most common way that manifested. Have something more to say?
Thank you for coming today. Really interesting presentation. On the invocation, do you happen to have your invocation handy to read?
We could pull it
They
up.
gave really great coverage in the Arizona Daily Star front page. You know, really great coverage of that. By the way,
I mean, I could read it, or I mean, it's also online. We can.
It's in the LA Weekly too.
Hold on, it's on my phone. Yeah, I'll answer another question while I look it up. Go ahead, ma'am.
PolitiFax has officially determined that the person occupying the White House lies over 69% of the time, which sort of goes with the biblical definition of the father of lies. Does it help you at all to know that the father of lies is now President of the United States, and can you do anything with that?
It's funny that came up. One of the favorite articles or quotes that I had published was somebody called who was it? Ted Cruz. Someone called Ted Cruz Lucifer, and I made a public comment that we want nothing to do with that guy. That guy's one of yours. That's your team. So, and one of the funny things about that is what are the built-in characteristics of Satan in the Bible is that he is a liar. But to us, that's just slander against the devil.
How do you turn it?
Oh, and just so you guys know, we have a floating mic too, so if you don't want to actually get up, then they can bring it around.
I don't know what you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to ask, how are you a religion? Why do you call yourselves a religion?
Well, we have everything that other religions have. Like how we were saying, Buddhism, Confucianism, they don't worship the Buddha, they don't worship Confucius. They see it more as like a role model. And, we still have our guiding principles and deeply held religious beliefs. We still have the community aspect. So, other than having a belief in the supernatural, we have everything else that a religion offers. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for asking.
So I have two questions. It's kind of crazy to think about how you guys were attacked and called a hate group when they're the ones being hateful. But two things: do you work with people like Luciferians and stuff like that? And then, if we want to be able to join your church or your religion, how would we be able to do it? Do you guys have different establishments around Arizona or what?
Well, do you want to take it?
If you want.
All right. For within other satanic groups, if they come to us and want to do a collaboration, cool. But other than, than that, we don't really extend ourselves. Recently, we just one of our members, he started a satanic blog on pathos.com under the. Their different sections. You have an atheist section. We recently got a satanic one. So, we're all about knowledge and gaining knowledge even from other satanic organizations and their writings. So we're open to that, and if you wanted to join, you can join nationally and get a membership card through our website. If you want to join the chapter, get in touch with me.
Perfect.
To answer your first question, a lot of that's regional, so we have various allies. In Tucson, the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, it's like the Aleister Crowley group. We happen to know a bunch of them. They're supportive. A lot of them like what we're doing and things like that. So I think if you go to different places, you'll have different, you'll have Wiccans in some places that are on board. Or Luciferians, we don't know many people that claim to be Luciferians around here. Even Church of Satan people, we have a mixed bag of people that support us and don't support us. Yeah. Also, we're having a picnic in Reed Park on Tuesday.
Yeah, I'll be there.
It's a meet and greet. It's on Facebook. We try to do those quarterly here and in Phoenix for people that are just interested, or even just to get to know people, because it's pretty cool.
Bring a dish.
Also, thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, sure. Bring a dish. I have the invocation here.
I have a question for you.
Yeah,
when I came, I was not aware that it was a metaphor. I thought that we would actually be debating you when you're so similar to us, because I think of Satan and the devil and God all as mythology, and so
so do we.
Yeah, and so I'm totally in a different place. After hearing you speak, you're more in a place where our group is, but I am surprised that you use the name Satanic.
Oh, cool.
It's fighting fire with fire, a lot of it, and in that there's a religious aspect to the fact that we find it a duty to rebel against the establishment. That's almost a sacred duty to us, which is another way to explain why it's a religion.
It had a very negative connotation for me. I wasn't aware until I'm here.
And we own that. A lot of us have been called names like that our entire life, so there's almost like a liberation to owning it and being like, yeah, we're Satanists, what about it? You know, we have the same rights everyone else does. We have the tenets, code of conduct to live by. We have books. You know, everything a religion has except for the delusional God complex.
And we're attracted to the dark aesthetic. You know, we're children of the night. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to know how you reach out to schools. How do you get your message out there that there's a Satan club in the school? And I don't even know how they get the good news message out there.
So, is this still on? Oh, sure. So the way it works with the schools is, you know, it was a Supreme Court case that said that because public schools are a limited public forum, you cannot deny a group to host them, you know, after school hours. And, you know, it's more of like a rental agreement than it is a school-sponsored thing. So it's not sponsored by the school or the district, and that's a really important thing to remember. However, just because the school itself isn't sponsoring these groups doesn't mean that it should be allowed. You know, these are schools, children go to school to learn, and if they're still in that environment, but they're learning about hell and damnation, they're not going to disassociate that from going to school and learning about the world. You know, they don't see that separation there. And, you know, it shouldn't be a standard that should be in place anyway. I mean, can you imagine thinking that you're sending your children off to school to learn about that, but also they're going to go to, you know, they need to be in school for about an hour afterwards. It's kind of like daycare almost. Knowing that they're going and learning this stuff, and that they have children proselytizing and recruiting other children into this point of view. I mean, it's crazy, right? So as far as getting them into schools with, like, you know, the good news clubs, all they have to do is apply. So every state is different, every school district is different as to how you apply and get in there, but it's essentially an application. You pay a rental fee for the year, and you have to have, you know, insurance to cover anything that might happen, you know, any damages to the school property, stuff like that. And that's essentially how it is. And so, you know, they apply, they get in, and then the schools also allow them to have like a booth or something at back to school nights. They allow them to distribute their flyers to, you know, send them home with the kids. So that's how the good news clubs are doing it. You know, and we get emails all the time from people who are like, look at the shit I got back from my kid. You know, they're furious. They're like, why am I getting this evangelical, you know, propaganda stuff being sent home with my child from school? So that's how they spread the word, and we're essentially kind of doing the same thing. We obviously have announced the fact that we have a program, trying to educate people on the need for it, the fact that they're there, and any volunteer or anyone who wants to have that our after-school Satan club, you just go through the same process. You apply with the school district, you know, have an agreement. They say, okay, you have some, you know, slots available to you at these times, and then we also have the materials that we can also send home with the kids, just so that their parents know, hey, you've got options. This is something that's available to you, and, you know, we can also go to the, you know, back to school nights to talk to the parents themselves. So I hope that answers your question.
While you have the mic, what was the turnout in the 3 schools that did accept?
Pretty good. Kids loved it. There was an article written about the Tacoma school. They only had the one kid who went consecutively, but they were actually able to talk to the kid about, you know, the stuff that they, you know, how much she really loved the club and stuff like that. So for all 3 of them, we had a pretty good turnout, and so we're hoping that with this volunteer program that we're opening up to other people, that it just kind of gets, you know, it's available to those who need it. So.
Should we identify ourselves, Oliver? Okay. Just wanted to ask, number one, a question with a follow-up question. Is Satan to you as real as Jesus is to a Christian?
Jesus or God? Those are 2 different questions.
Pardon?
No.
No. Okay.
No. It's literary, not literal. It's a metaphor by which we contextualize what we do.
Okay. The follow-up question would be then, as you are saying you're for good and for everything that a progressive Christian that I am would stand for, good, representing people, Veterans for Peace, for example, a secretary of that group, treasurer of a church women's group, doing good things, okay? Everything you said that's good seems to be what I believe and am doing as a Christian. It's curious to me that you would take on a name of a perceived fallen angel that you've portrayed as a person with wings as your leader or head.
So what's your question?
The question is why?
Because to us that is the most noble character in literature that ever was. It was the one that fought tyranny. We fight against an establishment that we find to be corrupt, an establishment that I have my.
Oh yeah.
I have we fight an establishment we find to be corrupt. We find an establishment that we find to be pushing their beliefs on others, that don't respect the freedom of religion. And in that, the best metaphor for that context is Lucifer or Satan. And we could go into the whole mythology of him losing his divine light as the light bringer, falling from heaven, and then coming back with an infernal light that is just as bright. So we find our way to do good through something that we consider to be the adversarial to the mainstream. That does not say that other religions don't do good things. That, of course, many Christian organizations, Jewish organizations, whatever, with the Abrahamic religions, have hospitals, they have schools, they have all kinds of things that benefit society, and a lot of people find their good through that religion. We find our good through our religion. A lot of us have never done charity before or felt included in any kind of church. We were always the weirdos. We were always kicked out. We were treated very poorly by Christians growing up, a lot of us. And what we did was we found that being the adversary to those types of situations gave us a sense of empowerment, a sense of family and community that we never had. So this is us finding our own way to do good. And we find that character in history, the Promethean sort of Satan, the one who gave knowledge to the humans against all odds, fought God. We can go on and on about this, but to us, that is the good guy.
Yeah, I just had a question. I was curious why you used the Jewish Star of David as your symbol.
It's a pentagram, not a Jewish star.
It's five points.
Well, that's. I thought.
Yeah, it's 5 points.
In using then that metaphor of a fallen angel that is going against the establishment that has been shown to be so hypocritical in ways and outright bad, wrong in others, that you would be more prone to use military or other aggressive, violent means to obtain good ends?
I don't understand the question.
Well, again, using the metaphor of Satan, Satan overthrew, did he not? He was violent in the way he did go about his way of going against God. Yeah?
Eventually God, I mean, it depends on which mythos you look at, but eventually God took away their voice, which is, that's a metaphor for censorship, obviously, against anyone.
So you can interpret the metaphor in different ways.
There's different mythologies, certainly. I mean, and again, like
just like the Bible can be.
What's that?
Just like the Bible can be looked at in different ways.
Sure, absolutely. And the thing is, when you have an established religion, we find that a lot of people that come to us have had great harm done to them by a religious establishment. And that's not to say we're fighting Christians or we're saying Christianity is bad, but what we find culturally is that this one religion seems to think they have a monopoly on religious freedom, and they don't acknowledge the things that they do that have been harmful throughout history. Witch hunts. There's a huge tarnish on this country of Christianity. If you look at how we were burning people at the stake and hanging people and based on flimsy evidence. This continued into the 80s and 90s, and we want to.
And we
believe
still
that
have
supernaturalism.
Racism now, but I don't. This is fast forward 400 years. We have progressed a little.
Of course, and we wish to progress more.
Was there a moment, I don't like mics, was there a moment in which you just sort of said, this is why I do this, this is why I'm in TST, this is I am so proud to be a part of this organization. Do you have a big moment?
I'm sure we all three have our various moments.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a coming to Satanism. My coming to Satanism was long before TST was a thing, but I mean, the Baphomet campaign, how they were turning the tables, playing the game as it was already set, and just kind of using the rules against the Christians, turning the tables against them, and it was just perfect. It was beautiful. It was witty. There was humor, and if you've ever heard the co-founder speak, Lucien Greaves, he is such a smart man, and he's incredibly charismatic. And I mean, the way he presents the organization, like seeing Lucien, I think was very. It helped me make my decision, knowing that this is the guy that's leading us. And I know with how carefully he plans everything, it's going to be okay. And we're going to be able to do some really good things.
Do you have one?
I mean, my coming to Satanism was a little bit more recent than, say, Michelle. She's been a lifelong where, I was always somebody who knew what Satanism was. I've read the Satanic Bible multiple times. It was something that I really respected, I really liked, and it drew me in, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. But for me, the Satanic Temple was the answer to that question that I wasn't necessarily asking, but was always in the back of my mind. So I like to say that the Satanic Temple, I didn't find the Satanic Temple found me, simply by, seeing the acts, reading the tenets, knowing the people. It was, I didn't really get into it until I was, fully immersed in it. I sought the people out. I talked to them. I read the literature. I did I read the Revolt of the Angels. I was familiar with the Satanic Bible, but, I looked into it, and it was a click. It was just that light bulb that went off in my brain, and just knowing that I was home. So for me, there wasn't necessarily a defining moment. It was a culmination of moments that just turned into that light bulb and that finding of this is where I was meant to be. So,
mine was a little different too. I studied revolutionary politics in college, and I discovered Mikhail Bakunin, who was one of the founders of modern anarchy during the Bolshevik Revolution, and he was kind of a self-proclaimed Satanist. And the reason why is it scared the shit out of the Russian Orthodoxy. And in that metaphor, he used it as power against the establishment. And for me, I'm a criminal defense attorney, so I fight the government for a living. And to me, this was a natural progression. Where do you go from here, as far as a philosophy? And then Lucien Greaves is very accessible. I was able to talk to him personally about all this, and I'm like, these are real people with a real cause who are very intelligent. And to me, I'm like, this is the most effective legal method, if nothing else, to combat what I find to be a very corrupt and overbearing establishment when it comes to religious liberty. And from there, from a political perspective, not partisan but political in general, I started to meet people. I got more into, I was always into the occult stuff just as, I listened to metal and I played D&D, all that stuff, all that stereotypical stuff that we did as kids. So it was always like a point of interest to me. And to be able to meld that and revolutionary politics, I'm like, where the hell else would I be?
So I know you guys have dealt with a lot of slander and negative words towards you, and I come from a family. All of my family is very Christian-like, and I learned at an early age when I was in Bible study, it wasn't for me because my teacher told me if someone was to come up to me and slap me, turn the other cheek, and I'm not I'm not doing that. So my question for you is, how do you handle your slander? Because I wouldn't say hot-headed, is just that I'm very defensive, and so when I get into debates with people, it gets ugly really quickly. So how do you peacefully handle slander and when people attack you or come to you at a certain way?
I guess I should answer that because I'm the nicer one of the two.
Wow.
So we do get slander, and a lot of the times it's it comes with a package, especially being the face of the Arizona chapter. Anytime you're a public, open Satanist, we get attacked. We've been told every single day that we're going to hell, and it's mostly just like you gotta toughen up, let it, fall off your shoulder. Don't give him any attention. Don't give him any time. Don't waste any of your day, because you're the most important person in your life. So, if these, you got to take it case by case. If this person's already has their mind set, there's really no point. Like, just let them believe what they want to believe. If this person comes to you with curiosity, indulge that, answer their questions, be polite, be respectful, because the moment you start, using ad hominem arguments, it's just, you've lost all credibility. So, always be better, always take the high road, and, give them a link, give them some articles, point them in the right direction, let them come to their own conclusion. If they're still against you, oh well.
The first step to winning an argument is knowing which arguments to make, which arguments to even have. And if you're going to embroiled in a situation where you have somebody who is just going to fight you on it the whole time, I just avoid I don't even bother. I'm not going to waste my time, like she was saying. It's like, if you're not going to convince anybody or change anyone's mind, even of your own existence, don't even engage it. If someone's open-minded and willing to hear you out, I always talk about it. But if someone's just like, you're wrong, I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're done here. There's that joke where if you're arguing with a creationist, it's like playing chess with a pigeon, where they'll knock all the pieces down, shit all over the board, and then fly back to their flock saying they won. Don't play chess with a pigeon.
That was awesome. Lucien Greaves was probably the most popular speaker at the National Secular Student Alliance Conference. He's amazing. And one thing I picked up from this, which it sounds, if you agree with me, it sounds similar to like with the gay community being called queer all their life, so they took it to themselves. Same thing, yeah. And I'm sure, a lot of people, and obviously not all Christians, but a lot of people think, yeah, we're all Satanists, so yeah, it's taking the power back. And I think we probably need to wrap this up, right? Yeah.
Oh, do you want to read the invocation? This is before we play this video. It's about 6 minutes long. It's worthwhile. But she's going to read the invocation that we were going to give, and then we'll play the reaction before they even heard what we were going to do, because they didn't care. But
let us stand now, unbowed and unfettered by arcane doctrines, born of fearful minds in darkened times. Let us embrace the Luciferian impulse to eat of the tree of knowledge and dissipate our blissful and comforting delusions of old. Let us demand that individuals be judged for their concrete actions, not for their fealty to arbitrary social norms and illusory categorizations. Let us reason our solutions with agnosticism in all things, holding fast only to that which is demonstrably true. Let us stand firm against any and all arbitrary authority that threatens the personal sovereignty of one or all. That which will not bend must break. That which can be destroyed by truth should never be spared its demise. It is done. Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.
One, could you say?
Do you want to ask us this afterwards? You can come up to us and ask us your questions.
Okay, simple question.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Could you say as a goal of the Satanistic Temple that you would believe in making peace through nonviolence?
No.
No. Okay.
No. Our goal is to assert ourselves and enforce either religious plurality or in only the alternative secularism, and in that we have a community of people that share a lot of beliefs as we do. So I'd say it's kind of a twofold thing, politically and personally.